Amanda Hiscocks is an anarchist activist here based in Toronto. During the G20, just before the violence happened, she and Alex Hundred were arrested. They were both thought to be the main ringleaders for the G20. They were arrested before there were any protests because they were both training activists how to de-arrest their colleagues, so how to take violent protest against the police. And they were, Alex and others had handed out a list of potential places to smash, I think. So I think the gist of the list, the meaning of the list was, don't smash an individual's store, but smash Starbucks. But they were both arrested and charged before the violence occurred. And then when the violence happened, they arrested more people, a couple dozen, I think, were arrested altogether and charged. Most people who were arrested were just released. Hiscocks, when she was convicted, I think she was given 16 months. When Amanda Hiscocks was arrested, she had zero sense of remorse when she was charged and went through courts. She was adamant that what she was doing was the right thing to change the world. Amanda Hiscocks was the person who the Toronto Star wrote about and called an activist hero for helping handicapped fellow prisoners. So she has a lot of support from the community. The minute, actually, a week before Amanda Hiscocks was released from prison, it was announced that she was being hired by the Ontario Public Interest Research Group, OPIRG, which is a major source of power for the activist community in Ontario. In York University's OPIRG, they fund no one is legal, and they fund the Maoist organizations, and they fund all the revolutionary groups. But the OPIRG organizations are funded by university student fees. They're called opt-out in many universities, like York University. So there the students can choose to opt out of paying their OPIRG fee for a period of 1 week a year. So if you ever watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, remember when they're about to smash down his house? And they said, but I didn't see a permit. Well, yes, but there was a permit. It was downstairs in the sub basement, protected by a tiger. It's the same thing with OPIRG. They make it so hard to actually get out of the information, so to get out of the payment, that most people just pay it. OPIRG is extremely anti-Israel organization, which is, if you're pro or anti-Israel, either way, you have to realize that not all University of Toronto students are anti-Israel, but in reality, or York or the other universities, the reality is that they're paying for anti-Israel protests. The reality is they're paying for socialist protests. The reality is they're paying for the Maoists to go marching around and interrupt men's rights groups' meetings. All these groups are funded by OPIRG. So Amanda Hiscocks was immediately hired by OPIRG right afterwards. Wow. Now, the same OPIRG that Amanda Hiscocks was hired by, I wish I could remember the name of the university, but the same OPIRG that Amanda Hiscocks was hired by, the person who bailed out the anarchist who hospitalized me in June 2012 also worked with OPIRG. So we find these organizations very close to the anarchist community, and Hiscocks is being supported by the OPIRGs. It's basically this radical, unrepentant, criminal anarchist who was released for jail was immediately given a job paid for by university students.
I'll start with saying thank you for the invite. I'm still really shocked that people invite me to things like this. It's kind of weird for me, it's new. And I guess I will sort of repeat what Dylan said, just to say that the things I'm going to be talking about, like what's happened to me for the last few years, has been a little intense. But at the same time, I don't feel like it has made me any more afraid. I feel like I'm more committed. And I think it's important for everyone to know that, we are really resilient as people, and we can take a lot. And we can take a lot more than sometimes we think that we can. So I certainly don't want to deter anyone from taking risks and from doing what needs to be done with anything that I'm saying today. So I want to start off with that. I really see the value of organizing around summits and of bringing so many people together on the streets and having so much strength in numbers and standing up to the police and just feeling the power that you can have when you're that committed. You can keep each other safe. I think it's a really great way to organize and really inspiring, and I was really glad to be part of that. So I was part of the Toronto Community Mobilization Network, and I was part of the action committee of that group. And I want to just take a second to talk about one really important thing that we had decided to endorse as a network, and that is the idea of diversity of tactics. And so, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, basically that means that whether or not you agree with a certain tactic that people might use, you don't shit talk to the media, and you don't snitch to the cops on those people, regardless of how you personally feel about this tactic. And we had decided to do that because basically, you know, we don't know, none of us know where people are coming from, and none of us know the experiences that they have and the reasons that they choose to speak truth to power in a certain way. And none of us are in a position to judge the people for the choices that they make. And so it was really important to us, if we're going to have a mass movement, that we can be inclusive to everyone. So the Toronto Community Mobilization Network's Action Committee, we were supposed to be making sure that people could engage in a diversity of tactics, but safely. So the idea being that, you know, if there's a nonviolent, child-friendly demonstration that's been called for this corner at this time, there can't be a confrontational direct action that's also been called for that corner at that time. Our own backgrounds, and just from like knowing what happens around the world at these summits, that shit's gonna go down, right? Like, people don't all wanna go to a union march, they don't all wanna go in a circle and like stay in the protest pen. People are gonna wanna break stuff, they're gonna like wanna dress all in black, and they're gonna wanna light some fires, and they're gonna do that, right? So we were organizing the Get Off the Fence March, and the police did not like that either. 15 minutes is really short. So, okay, so I guess I'll talk a little bit about what actually happened. So on the morning of June 26th, it was about 4:30 in the morning, because in true anarchist style, like the big day's coming up, you know, we wouldn't be in bed or anything, we'd be like last minute organizing, of course. So we're still awake. There's this bang on the door, and we're kind of like, what? Everything goes slow motion. There's another bang on the door, and all these cops come crashing through the door. We didn't know they were cops at first, because we're like, what's happening? And then this one cop comes to the door, and he's got this gun drawn. And he's like, you know, swooping around the room with his gun, and people are yelling, like, get down on the ground, hands above your head, and all this stuff. And like, what I remember is that I wasn't scared, and I think that maybe I was in shock at that point, but I have this like sneaking suspicion that actually it's because I knew full well that those cops were not going to fire on us. Like, middle class, white activists, absolutely no chance that we were in actual danger. And that's like really an important thing to think about. Okay, so for me, the fallout from my arrest was that I was charged with 3 counts of criminal conspiracy, so conspiracy to commit mischief, which is hilarious, it makes me sound like a leprechaun, like mischief. Conspiracy to obstruct police and conspiracy to assault police. And conspiracy is this weird thing because you don't actually have to do anything, you just have to talk about it, and you can be guilty of it. So it's nebulous, legally speaking. Sadly, we never got to figure out how the evidence actually worked, because we didn't end up going to trial, which I regret sometimes a lot. So conspiracy is not used that much against activists anymore. It was originally put in place during the Winnipeg General Strike, and then people were like, whoa, conspiracy, like that is a sketchy thing. Like, it's not really like a law that should be used. And so, conveniently, drug trafficking and terrorism are charges that disproportionately are laid against people of color. So I was held in jail for a month while I was waiting to be released on bail, which was 140 grand. I had full house arrest. I couldn't have any involvement in protests. I couldn't have any association with my 16 co-accused. I couldn't use anything wireless, which is weird. So that lasted for 9 months. Then my conditions were like loosened a little bit. And then in the fall of 2011, we went into preliminary inquiry. And while we were in that process, we were offered a deal by the Crown. And after like weeks of really grueling, terrible conversation and discussion, we decided to negotiate it and take it. So then I was sentenced. I was sentenced to 16 months in jail, and because of the way it works in Canada, you do 2/3 of your sentence, so I got out at just under 11. And I have 3 things to say about jail. I'll make them quick. So if you ever want to see who are the most marginalized people in this country, in this society, spend some time in jail. Like, the people in jail are the people that are taking the brunt of all the things that we're fighting against. They're the people that are living with these consequences of the stuff that as social justice organizers are the things that we're taking on. Also, you'll know that there's a lot of things that a privileged person can do in jail. And a jail sentence doesn't really mean that you have to stop organizing. It just means that you organize in a different context. And so I kind of jokingly, but not really jokingly, recommend that we have like one organizer on every range at all times. Because there's a lot that you can do. And the last thing is just that a healthy person with a supportive community can survive jail, even thrive in jail. It's not as hard as it seems. And so when people are thinking about the kinds of actions that you want to engage in, like make realistic decisions, but also think about what you're able to give up and know that you're tougher than you probably think that you are. So I'm talking a little bit about criminalization of dissent and how that happens. So in our case, a few things were really overblown. A lot of it was really overblown. So a lot of us were arrested by guns and gangs. So this was like a heavily armed, really aggressive police unit with really aggressive prosecutors. Shortly after our arrest, we found out that we'd been infiltrated by 2 undercover cops for about 1.5 years, and one of them was from the anti-terrorism unit of the OPP. We were brought to court on the first day, and we were taken to this special conspiracy court where every single person was in this individual locked box. And then during my bail hearing, I was told that I was worse than the most heinous murderer, for reals, by the Justice of the Peace. The wireless condition, like the not having any wireless devices, apparently is because if something can receive a signal, it can be used to make an explosive, which I don't know how to do that. None of us had charges of explosives. And then during a preliminary inquiry, there was this extra security station. So you come into the courthouse, you go through security, and then just in case you picked up your gun on the way from that security to the room, then there's another security on the way into the room. So they just did all these things to make us seem like really scary, which we really weren't. So we get in this situation where at one end of the spectrum, people are like, like getting down on people and denouncing property destruction and people who will physically defend themselves against the police. On the other end of the spectrum, people are mocking people who want to like put out petitions and go to rallies that aren't confrontational. And so we have these divides and it's not useful. Cops love that, that's what they want. So we need to make sure that we don't buy into that. And lastly, I think they do this stuff because they want to send a message that if you protest in certain ways, the state can hurt you. And it's really important that we send a message back, which is that we're not afraid of that. Like, you can't really hurt us that badly. And we're going to stand together and we're going to stand in solidarity. Like, why do we need to keep going in the face of this kind of repression? And I think that, I guess I'll end on this. If that's a question that we're asking ourselves, then we really need to check our privilege. And if organizing is a choice for us, then we are the people with the largest responsibility to keep organizing. Because if it's a choice for us, it means that we're the ones benefiting from the system that's currently in place. And it means that we have resources that make any consequences less severe for us than they'll be for other people. And so we gotta be willing to give things up.